Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through CWM, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Carson Partners, a division of CWM, LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors. This is The Way to Wealth, with host Scott Ford, a jiu-jitsu fighting, woodworking, beekeeping entrepreneur who is also the managing director, partner, and wealth advisor of Carson Wealth. Financial freedom is the goal, and clarity and simplicity is how we'll get there. Let's get to it. This is Way to Wealth.
Hello, and welcome back to the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple so you can fully live and fully live today, not 30 years from today. Happy to have a guest that you're going to be excited to hear, Ken Walls. I actually heard about Ken from my friend Rich Christensen, and a little bit about Ken. Ken's a #1 best-selling author, CEO of a web development and social media firm, and the creator of the Grow Live Academy. We were just actually talking about podcasts, and we launched this podcast this year. So Ken's an expert in this field. In fact, he teaches podcasting. So super excited to share Ken with the audience and actually learn to see what he's up to, not just in podcasts, but with the Grow Live Academy. So first, welcome to the Way to Wealth podcast, Ken.
Scott, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have a conversation. Would love to start a little bit of, we're talking about, all right, Ken Walls, and we're talking about the Grow Live Academy. If you don't mind sharing a little backstory with the audience, just as far as what got us here today on this podcast, what was your evolution in getting to the Grow Live Academy?
So in 2014, I hired this new salesperson that was a sniper in the Marine Corps, and a law enforcement buddy of mine hit me up and said, "Hey, can you give my buddy a job? He's a veteran and can't find work." And I'm like, "Well, what are his qualifications?" And he's like, "Well, he was a sniper in the Marine Corps." And I'm like, "Well, I don't need anybody shot. So what am I, so I basically, long story short, I brought him on as a salesperson. And I didn't have the bandwidth to invest in training him. So I start looking for Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy training on YouTube. And I come across this Grant Cardone guy I'd never heard of. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I'm watching some of Grant's videos. I'm like, this dude is intense. And wow, I love his closing skills and what he teaches. And so I ended up investing $36,000 into Grant's training platform for my new sales guy and other salespeople and me and the company. And I decided I wanted Grant as a client and a friend. Well, Grant has over 10 million followers, and he's a billionaire now. And it's not, a lot of people want Grant as a client and a friend, and so I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to make this happen? And so it's a very long story. I won't bore you with all the details, but I ended up putting my assistant on a plane, and I flew her to Miami, and she waited on Grant to come in and delivered some custom bottles of wine that I had made for Grant and his wife with their family photo on the bottles. And Grant was blown away, and he called me that day. And at the end of the conversation, he said, "If there's anything I can do for you, let me know." I said, "There is. I want you as a client." And he said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "I do websites and search engine optimization." And I searched sales training, and Dale Carnegie pops up #1, and you're nowhere to be found. And that guy's dead. And he goes, "I know." And I won't repeat exactly what he said, but it ticks me off. And can you fix that? And I said, well, we can certainly, take a look at it. So Grant ended up becoming a client of mine. I became a client of his. I started running ads on his television network, and And I realized I'm watching him at the time using live streaming on Periscope. And I had an Android. I didn't even have an iPhone, and it wasn't available on Android. So I ended up getting an iPhone. Then it's another long story I won't go into, but I switched everything over to Apple. But I get on Periscope. I'm watching Grant, and I'm hearing Grant go, "This is insane. You've got to use this medium. Like, this is free television, free advertising. You got to use this. Go live." And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And so I decided to start live streaming. And that was in 2014. That was before Facebook. That was before Facebook Live didn't exist. It was Periscope, and there was another one called Meerkat that was out for a while. That's out of business. Periscope's gone now too. Twitter bought it, and now it's all Twitter Live. So, but in the first year, Scott, I knew, let me talk about the first day that I went live. I was terrified. Like, I mean, I always joke and say I was nervous as a hooker in church. I was so afraid. I don't even know what I was afraid of. I was just like, what am I going to say to this phone? Like, I'm just looking at a phone. What? And so I just go live, and I'm like, hey, I'm Ken Walls. And it was weird. It was really weird, but I made it through it. And later that day, I'm like, that wasn't bad. I'm going to do that again. So I did it again. And then I did it again, and I did it again. And I started doing it like 4, 5, 6 times every day. I'd go live for 10, 15, 20 minutes. I'd give a tip on how to have a better website, a tip on branding, a tip on search engine optimization for your website, a tip on social media, all of these things. And then I start telling my story and things. And by the end of the first year, I had done over 800 live streams on Periscope and Meerkat and other things. And I was like, okay. And then Facebook Live came out, and that felt weird because I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm ever going to use Facebook Live. I'm just going to do this on Periscope, where I don't actually know those people. Like, Facebook, that's my mom, and people are like there that I know. And then eventually I'm like, okay, I got to use Facebook. I'm going to have to use YouTube Live. I got to get on LinkedIn Live. And I'm now known as the king of live streaming. I've done well over 3,000 live streams. And I've sold millions and millions of dollars worth of products and services. Amazon reached out to me and asked me if I would be in their influencer program. So I'm an Amazon influencer. I've got the blue check mark on my personal Facebook page. Facebook reached out and offered that to me. And I've got the blue check mark on Amazon, so I'm verified on both those platforms. Twitter hates me. I don't know. Since Elon bought it, maybe I'll get a blue check mark there someday. I don't know.
Exactly. That's it.
But I just I'll never forget Grant saying, and it's again another long story, but I won a trip on Grant's private jet. And in lieu of getting on his jet, I said, well, I've been on private jets. I'd rather just sit face-to-face, one-on-one time with Grant and pick his brain. And of course, that saved them $30,000 in fuel. So I flew to Miami and spent 3 hours one-on-one with Grant. And, I'll never forget him saying, you got to get attention. Money follows attention. You've got to get attention. If you want more money, you got to get more attention. There's no other way about it. And I just remember thinking, God, in theory, he's right. He's right. I know he's right. You can't you got to get in front of more people if you want to make more money. I don't know another way. So that's where live streaming for me, I have people reach out to me, famous, really, really famous authors reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to be on your show. And I'm like, yeah. How much money you got? No, I'm kidding. I don't do that. But I think I've successfully gotten enough attention that now people want me to help them get attention.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. At first, I thought the moral of the story was if you're a hooker or nervous in church, just keep going to church because eventually the nerves wear off. But that's not where you went. But there could be truth to that. So to me, I'm taking it as in live streaming. I mean, hence the name Grow Live Academy. Now it makes, of course, if no one knew you, it makes complete sense. What do you mean Grow Live Academy? You're the go live guy.
Yeah. And, it's kind of morphed into more than just live streaming the Academy has. It's like I teach a lot of stuff in there about how to build an audience, how to do use certain tools for social media posts, and just a lot of very, very in-depth stuff. And we have a mastermind meeting every Thursday. So it's live on Zoom. So, and I have celebrity friends of mine that come by the Thursday night meetings, and they teach and they help, and people are like, I'm talking like movie stars. Glenn Morshower, who's one of my dearest friends in the world. He's been an actor for 47 years, and he comes by almost every Thursday night. He's there, and one of the wisest people I've ever known in my life. Tom Ziegler, Zig's son, has been in the Grow Live Academy teaching, and Kyle Wilson, who was Jim Rohn's business partner for 18 years, good friend of mine. He's been in there, and Todd, and Jeffrey Gittimer, and Rich Christensen. He came in, yeah. and Todd, and so it's really it's morphed into something quite spectacular, and I just love. I've built a movement, so to speak, and it feels unbelievable.
That's great. Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. And certainly it all makes sense. And I've heard it said and say it that dollars follow value. So Grant's words are dollars follow attention, and no doubt. And I also believe that dollars follow value. And if we show up figuring how to serve and create value, dollars follow that.
Amen.
Right. So most of the audience is business owners and entrepreneurs that listen in. That's who I am. It's who I'm called to speak to and share this message with. And one of the things I would want to ask you is with everything going on in the markets and the economy, and who knows when the people are listening to this, but look, I'm in wealth management. So I've heard it said, BST will happen always, which stands for big, scary things. So it doesn't matter what year you pick. You either just came through a big, scary thing, you're in a big, scary thing, or guess what? A big, scary thing's on its way. Yep. Regardless of the big, scary things that are always going to be around, what's the number one thing someone can do to improve their business and life now?
Well, depending on the industry, I guess it doesn't really depend on the industry. I have a friend who's a dentist. I have a lot of dentist friends. This one in particular happens to be in the wealthiest area of Ohio, and he's set up shop there. And I said, I think the average dentist there should be one per 25,000 population. And this particular area, there's about 45,000 people that live in this area, and there are 27 dentists, right? They all went, hey, that's where all the rich people are. Let's move there. And I said, dude, if you want to separate, then I said, I'm sorry, Dr. Dude. If you want to separate yourself from the pack, you have to do what the rest of the pack isn't willing to do. And dentists and a lot of other professions have a tendency of being incredibly educated, but when it comes to marketing, they're like, they just don't know what to do. Do a show, do what Scott Ford is doing, do what Ken Walls is doing, do a show and do this. Get on there and talk about why bad dental health leads to heart attacks. Get on there and talk about what the best all natural toothpaste is, why you should have fluoride in your toothpaste, or why you shouldn't have fluoride. I don't know. I'm not a dentist. Yep. Get on there and deliver value, which you were just talking about. Deliver value for free, and solidify. Listen, my show, Breakthrough Walls, has been around for 4 years. I started with episode number 1. I've now done over 450 interviews on that show. I was not the podcast expert on episode number 1. Trust me. Now I've done more than most, not as much as many. But I'm considered an expert. I have companies that hire me, fly me into their cities to speak to their people, speak at events, get up on stage and speak on stage with some legends. I've spoken with some legends and Scott, I think I should also preface this entire conversation with this, just so you know, just for a little bit of comparison for people to compare themselves. In 9th grade, I believe it was, I had an English teacher that told me I was an idiot and I would never amount to anything. In 12th grade, and by the way, I've written 7 books now, and that English teacher's not written one. In 12th grade, they called me in and said, hey, you didn't get a biology credit in 10th grade. And I said, yeah, I didn't go to that class. It sucked. I hated it. They're like, well, you need that credit though to graduate. And I'm like, well, that's a dumb rule too. And I'll just come back and do it in summer school. And they're like, we don't offer it in summer school. You have to come back for a whole year. I said, I got stuff to do. I'm not coming back here for a whole year for a biology. I aced trig, analytic geometry, calculus, algebra, advanced algebra. And you're telling me biology is going to stop me from getting that little piece of paper? They're like, that's exactly what we're telling you. Yeah. I said, well, then, you know what? I hate you. I hate your rules, and I'm out of here. And I left. I walked out of high school in 12th grade, never got a GED, never went back, never got a diploma. And I've had thousands of college graduates work for me over the years. So
yeah,
it all comes down to, people listening can't see it, but I have a library, and that's literally 5%, not even, of the maybe 2% of the books that I own in multiple places here in my office. I have just books and books and books that I've read and I've written. And Jim Rohn had a saying that I heard many years ago, and that is, a formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. And I always say I'm just a high school dropout that will outwork most people. And I've figured it out to a degree, I think. Anyway, so.
Sure. Well, I didn't know that. I can share this brief part of my history is not that unsimilar to that. I did finish, but in my junior year in high school, I can remember my English teacher, requiring this term paper, and you had to have the term paper to graduate. And I just wasn't into it. Homework and that's specifically that type of thing wasn't my thing.
Right.
I wasn't upset. I wasn't ugly. That's not how I was raised. It was just like, Scott, where's your term paper? And I can still hear her saying, I'm sorry, Mrs. Chestnut, I didn't do it. And it wasn't like I didn't do it, just I didn't do it. And she said, I cannot believe in my 26 years of teaching, I've never had someone not do a term paper. I said, well, I'm sorry, I just didn't do it. So she said, would you be willing to do an oral presentation on it? on that subject the next week. Sure. So I got up and presented. It was on motivation and goals. Imagine that. And I got an A. And
I love it.
So God bless that Mrs. Chestnut to have an open enough mind to let out of the box a little bit the opportunity of another way to learn and think about it. And like you,
that's awesome.
Again, this is nothing but bookshelves. My office at work, nothing but bookshelves, and love to learn and read. And so I'm a podcast junkie, but we all do things different. So it's like, get out of the box a little bit and let's just figure out how to bring value to more people and do it and learn our way versus this is the way. So
I just think that the world needs to get over, and it's funny, Rich Christensen and I have had very deep conversations about this, but the programming, like in the Four Agreements, the beginning of the Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz talks about the programming of the human and how we're so conditioned. And I try so hard. Like my daughters, I have two daughters, an 11-year-old and a 16-year-old. And they're like, they know I didn't graduate high school. And they're like, well, do we have to graduate high school? I'm like, you know what? Honestly, it's up to you. I'm not, I don't want them to be programmed the way society thinks they need to be marching. I march to a different beat. I do. And it's not for everyone. Some people it's so ingrained in them that it shocks their system to hear something like that. And they're like, what? You would encourage your daughters to? No, I didn't say I encouraged them to drop out of school.
Sure.
At all. No, I encourage them to be incredibly educated, and they are.
Yes. And there's many ways to get there. I can think about now a friend that I work with in the past, Paul Check. Actually, he's in the podcast game as well. And Paul's one of the smartest people I've met, and he has an 8th grade education. You could probably stick all of our bookshelves together in his and shake it around. He's read so many books. And so anyway, it's like being, your unique DNA sequence of who you were made to be that. And if it happens to be academia, superb. And if it happens to be, another way, great. And ultimately, isn't education learning how to think and learning how to learn anyway? So whatever path takes you there. And that's what's so cool about podcasting is I think you can interview some interesting people, have interesting conversations, and learn something. And that's what inspires me. And then share those learnings with people who have similar interests. And so it's a fun piece of the game for me. So this is why having this kind of conversation, getting to know you and learn your backstory, as well as things that you've learned, wisdom that you've distilled that you can share, that's meaningful.
Yeah.
So I'd like to always ask, Ken, this is the Way to Wealth podcast. We're about making money simple. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit on that because it's the Way to Wealth podcast. It's all about making money simple. And it does follow a bigger theme, which is what I call the infinite entrepreneur. So you see the sign Legato Family. It's my partner, Rich and Andrea. In that, it's how do you create this phenomenal family value and system for your family and for generations you may never meet. And then 4 P's of a sustainable business. That's our coaching piece of purpose, people, process, and profit in business. Again, business owners, entrepreneurs. Then it's the Way to Wealth. Business finances and personal finances. How do we make that simple so it can support everything else, which leads to a healthy, wealthy, wise, and happy, that the money should support a healthy, wealthy, wise, and happy life. Thinking of that frame, and then specifically the Way to Wealth is our process of making money simple. What would you say is the best piece of financial advice you've ever heard or been taught?
Wow. I don't know how to answer that.
I'll give you one. I have several, but if I had to say the best, and this is pretty, I'm going to say it like this. There's 2 things that come to mind immediately for me. One is paying yourself first. But for me, the best piece of financial advice I've ever heard that I've implemented is, number 1, that you are your best investment. In other words, everyone talks about their wealth. If you just think of legato, I want to leave X amount of money to the next generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not wealth. I mean, that's a currency. It's what we exchange for wealth.
Yeah.
How you created it is the actual wealth. Your purpose and passion and things you learned is actually the wealth. So I always think the best piece that I've ever really got, and of course, pay yourself first. That's another really big one. But I think the one for me would be, and it can mean so many different things, but we were just talking about it, investing in yourselves. All those books weren't free. Your time with Grant Cardone of stuff that you learn, that's not free, but you're investing in yourself, which to me, you are the asset. So investing in yourself is the best investment.
You know, I probably came from Grant. When I've heard him, you know, I've invested, I don't even know how much with Cardone over the years, hundreds of thousands. And, you know, I think it was him or somebody said, get a coach. I was like, why? I got YouTube. I got TikTok. What do I need a coach for? I can just watch free videos. But I think and I'm a coach now, you know, and I coach some I coach a couple of billionaires and I'm not a billionaire yet. And, you know, I think about like the investment I've made in coaching one-on-one time with somebody like Scott Ford, who's obviously very successful and brilliant, to be able to say, hey, I have this weekly meeting with my coach and we're going to talk about what's next. We're going to talk about what am I here for? We're going to talk about how do I get to the next level? We're going to talk about how do I develop more wisdom to pass on generationally? You know, things like that. And you can't get that by watching videos on YouTube. You can't have that one-on-one, you know, conversation where you can ask an intimate question and find out the answer. Well, one thing that I am 100% certain of is there's not one single person on this planet who doesn't have feelings and thoughts of insecurity on a daily basis. We all go through it, all of us.
Yeah.
You can say, well, Donald Trump doesn't. Yes, he does. Well, this person doesn't, that person. Yes, they do. Grant Cardone, who's a billionaire. Sure. I've heard him say it publicly and he said it to me privately. And that is, I wake up scared to death every day of my life. Every day of my life. It's a long story how he got in touch with me, but he was on Undercover Billionaire, the television show. And, I was the first person to interview Grant about Undercover Billionaire, and his camp, somebody, I don't know who, but they reached out to me and you know, I said at one point, I said, well, Grant, you know, it's not ever too late. Like, it's not too late. I mean, Colonel Sanders was 66 years old and we all have heard that story, you know, but he goes, I'll never forget him saying this. He goes, I don't know. It might be too late. And I said, what? This was live. I said, what? And I said, really? And he said, yeah, it might be too late for some people. It might be too late. And I've never let that go because it haunts me. What if it's too late? What if it's too late? And do people think about that? No, they don't. We have this ego that thinks we're going to live forever, and you're not. You're going to die. Get your freaking foot off the brake and stomp on the gas. If there's a book you need to read it, buy it and read it. If there's a seminar you need to attend, go. Spend the money, invest the money. Stop being so cheap. Figure out what you're here for and then stomp on the freaking gas. Go.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the things. So you mentioned something earlier, Ken, as far as like finding your purpose as part of this, and I couldn't agree more. And that's what I love. So in doing that, what I really feel like is missing in our current times, day and age, is space and margin. And it's one of the reasons I fell in love with podcasts years ago. Like, I couldn't tell you the last time I watched TV. It's been years. I don't watch TV. If there's a sporting event, specifically UFC, and it's recorded where I can watch a replay, sometimes I do that.
Yeah.
But that's it. No news, because it's all, biased. And I don't care what side, it doesn't matter to me. It's still filtered BS that they're feeding me. What's cool about podcasts and other forms like that is it's long form, and you have time and space to articulate a thought. The other person interviewing can share and articulate their thought. And yes, it's almost going back to some ancestral tribal wisdom of sitting around a campfire with no place to get and having real conversations without some major agenda. And to me, that's what's needed. And that's one of the cool things about this format of information.
Totally agree with you. I think that I mean, I'm very transparent. I obviously I've been pretty open. But, I'm a recovered alcoholic, and I'm coming up on 20 years sober. And I spent many, many, many years going to this recovery program meetings. And it's the best counseling you can receive for, you donate $1 while you're there to help with coffee and cookies and whatnot. But, the wisdom, there are very, very famous celebrities that I've been in these recovery meetings with that are incredibly wise. There are doctors and psychologists and homeless people and everything in between. And there's a saying, and that is, take what you need and leave the rest behind. Because everybody is right where they are. I can read a book like Grant Cardone's book right there, Sell or Be Sold. I read that back in 2014 or 15. And if I read it today, it would take on a different meaning, because I'm a different me. I'm not the Ken Walls that existed in 2015, hopefully. And if I am, which is what most people are, right? They stop living at 25 years old and eventually die at 85 or whatever. But, we change. Hopefully we're changing, and we're becoming wiser, and we're doing things differently. And I just think that when you can sit and have these conversations like you and I are having, even if you're talking to a complete idiot, which I have, right? We've and maybe I'm the idiot. But
it might be today, just saying, but we'll see. It's too early.
Right. But you can still learn something from every single person. And that's what I love about this. Is it's like having an AA meeting kind of without the dollar donation or whatever. So I don't know. I love this stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I heard it said, I mentioned jujitsu. It's one of my things, but it's like, the best are always white belts, the black belts. So just a white belt who never quit, just going up. And the cool thing about that is, no matter who you are on the mat, kind of like an AA meeting, you could be the president of a country, or you could be homeless. And when you step on the mat, you're neither of those. You're a human being, just like the other, that's going to go for a role, and it's going to be what it's going to be. And that's some of the beauty of it. So as you can learn from anyone on the mat. And then I've also heard it said, I think actually Rich and I have said this to each other, we're just a bunch of 5-year-olds here trying to figure it out. And there's so much truth to that, and so that's a great place to come from. And let's grow from that, and not stay in the 5-year-old state, but grow, get better. And from that, it's the I, we, all motto, like getting whole and complete in ourselves at that level, so that we can share at the we level, our family and community, so that we can share at the all level. And this is just a format to be able to share more broadly. So I would ask Ken, just as we look to wrap things up, anything that you would feel inspired to share with the audience, a piece of wisdom or financial advice or business advice, any things from any of those three areas that may come to you that you would want to make sure and share with the audience. I know that's broad, but if anything just comes to you, would love to hear.
Two things. Number one, you're way, 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 way more capable and bigger than you think you are. Way more. Everybody on this planet, we're so much bigger than we give ourselves credit for. If God created us, and God being this ethereal being out here that created everything, and scriptures say that God created us in his image. I mean, come on, man. That's huge.
Pretty big.
I mean, that's huge. And the other thing is, I started 19 years ago. I started meditating, and at first somebody told me about it, and I'm like, that's evil. That's not in the Bible. I'm not. And I'm like, but yet it is. Jesus meditated. I started meditating. I heard this story, and I wrote it about this. One of the chapters in my first book is titled "Look Inside." There's this old Hindu story about one day the gods got really fed up with humans abusing this free gift they had given them forever, and so they all got together and had a meeting and said, okay, we've been giving humans this gift. The gift was the answers to everything. Like any question you could ever have was right there, always free and available. They said, we've been giving this to them and they're abusing it, and so let's take it away. And they said, okay, we're going to take it away from the humans and we're going to hide it. So they have to actually put in effort to be able to use this. They have to go put in effort to find it. And the first god said, okay, let's do this. Let's hide it at the highest point on the highest mountain on planet Earth. And they all said, no, they'll learn how to climb and easily find it. And the second one said, well, how about this? Let's bury it in the deepest part of the ocean. And no, they'll learn how to dive down and they'll find it too easily. And the wisest god of them all spoke up and said, you know what? I think we should hide it deep within the humans themselves. They'll never think to look there.
Yep.
And so it continues today. And, all of the answers that we desire, all of the things, the stuff, whether it's learning how to manifest physical things, money, friendship, love, whatever it is, all of the answers are right here, right beneath the xiphoid process in the center of our chest. The answers are there. And all we have to do is go do what Dr. Wayne Dyer said, and that is look for the space between our thoughts. And he said the beauty in music is the silence between the notes. So if we learn how to you can't stop your mind, but you can definitely slow it down and find that gap. And when you find that gap, the answers to everything are right there in between your thoughts.
That is very well said. I couldn't agree more, Ken. And when you start hearing that, you start recognizing they're all saying the same thing. Yep. Whether it's Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, whether it's Michael Singer, The Surrender Experiment, The Untethered Soul, whether it was Christ, you could go on. And I know yet they're saying the same thing. And I'll just add, you're it. We're all it. It's in there. That's the beauty. And so meditating, not 19 years, I don't even know how long, probably 10. And that definitely has been a secret ingredient for me. In a big way, from someone who never thought they'd be able to meditate because I couldn't sit still, let alone meditate. But then one of the questions was, what in the hell are you running from? I'm asking myself, like, what are you so busy for? It's a good question. And so meditation really helped me with that. And the first book I read on it, coming from, a religious background for one, so I thought it was evil too. Second, coming from someone who couldn't sit still, let alone meditate, was The Relaxation Response from Dr. Herbert Benson from a Harvard MD. So simple, science-based, no woo. Now I'm pretty woo, but wasn't then. And anyway, I think that's great advice. Literally, I think if there's any takeaway from this particular podcast, if people were to just sit with themselves in quiet contemplation or thought, or better yet, no thought, finding that quiet space and truth within them, all the truths and answers that you're looking for sit right there.
It's the truth, man. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like Paul said in the Bible, life is like a vapor. It's here and then it's gone. And if we focus on, you're not taking any money with you. I love the name of your podcast, The Way to Wealth, but wealth can be defined in financial means, which I think is just a byproduct of actual wealth. The actual wealth is the freedom to not live in that turmoil, that mouse running on the wheel that most of us go through. So yeah.
I'll define it and wrap it with this, Ken, and that is our definition of wealth. The root word. So when you think of the way to wealth, here's what we mean. The root word is weal, W-E-O-L. And what that means is well-being. So we all is the word wealth, and the meaning of we all is well-being. And that's what we're all after. This sense of well-being. We just think money's going to get it. Doesn't. It's a tool. It's an energy we can use, but well-being's the answer, and finding that center truth within you is where you find the well-being. So thank you for being on. Thank you for being transparent and open and sharing your heart and wisdom with us on the Way to Wealth podcast. We'll have to do a run back at some point and have you back on to share additional wisdom and knowledge. And so with that, gang, thank you for joining the Way to Wealth podcast, and we will catch you back here next week as we continue to focus on making money simple so you can fully live and fully live now. See you next week.
The opinions voiced in Way to Wealth with Scott Ford, Managing Director, Partner, and Wealth Advisor of Carson Wealth, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Way to Wealth are not affiliated with CWM LLC or Cetera Advisor Networks LLC. Legato Family is not affiliated with Cetera Advisor Networks LLC or CWM LLC. Carson Wealth, 19833 Leitersburg Pike, Suite 1, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.